Hi everyone, and welcome to Line of Fire. I'm Stanley Joseph, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about gun violence in high school and college campuses. The October 24th shooting at Marysville, Washington, brought to light a disturbing question that previous shootings in the past have brought to light. Why do some individuals feel the need to solve their social issues with violence while others do not? On today's episode, we'll be discussing potential factors that might influence these shooters in the way that they behave, as well as whether or not allowing students and faculty to carry handguns to campus might deter future shooters. The panelists I have with me today to discuss this issue are Brian Chancellor, a graduate student in the School of Arts and Technology, studying game design. We have Jonathan Minnick, a senior studying biochemistry, as well as a Green Fellow alumni. We have Nancy Fairbank, student government vice president. And we also have with us Ryan Miller, a senior studying computer science, as well as a concealed handgun license holder. Panelists, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And while we all know that statistically the likelihood of a school shooting happening at any school is very, very low, we have noticed some patterns emerge from the previous shootings. And one of these patterns is that the shooter in these crimes is ultimately, more often than not, a young male. So my first question to you panelists is, why do you think that the overwhelming number of these shooters is a male as opposed to a female?
I mean, I think that males in general are shown throughout studies to be more prone to violence. I think it's partially based on culture and partially based on biology. They have higher levels of testosterone. And then culturally, I think there is a lot of oppression of emotion. So guys aren't expected to show emotion like girls are, and they may not have that outlet or release. So where a girl can get off anger or frustration by talking to her friends, guys may feel like they have to bottle it up internally, and so it comes out more explosively than it would with a girl.
So they're facing a different kind of social pressure that might lead certain young men to expressing their frustration in a different way.
Sure.
In this way, perhaps mainstream media has a role to play within a young man's aspirations and role models. Are the male characters that are exhibited within AMC movies and television shows one of the hard knock type of lifestyles? Very assertive, very aggressive type males. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think that there are a wide variety of male characters. One of the issues that people have always had with female characters is that there only are very narrow tropes or stereotypes to look at. So with males, I definitely see that there could be the potential for more violent male role models, but I do think at least it helps that there's a diversity of male characters where males play almost every type of role or lead while women are more limited to certain tropes and stereotypes.
But I think it's interesting that media, especially very violent media, has become really prevalent, and not only in our country but in other countries. And you don't see this type of violence repeated elsewhere, at least not on the scale and the consistency as we see over here in America.
Absolutely.
So we're all bringing up the subject of the way media is portraying men and how that might influence young men. And so one of the common arguments, or one of the reasons that people think certain students turn to committing these crimes is because they feel that these students are playing maybe violent video games, watching violent movies, and they feel like this may be, in some cases, influencing them on top of maybe if they have maybe mental issues or already struggling in school. Do you guys think that violent films, television, video games might have an effect on the way a young man perceives the world?
I think it might have some effect. I mean, any media you consume will change your views on the world in some way. But I think you also have to view it in context. I mean, the best-selling video games out there, they're non-violent. I mean, Minecraft is not a bloody gore shoot fest, and neither is The Sims, and those are the highest-grossing, most popular games available. So, and even with movies, I would say that they're not as violent as, say, some other physical activities that we engage in that are deemed okay by society. So I don't think that's a full scapegoat that we can go to. I think it's something to consider, but I don't think it's the major cause.
So you're saying it might be possible?
I say it might be possible in certain individuals. I mean, what we take in does affect the way that we see the world. I mean, you can't doubt that. You can't say being bombarded with violence isn't going to do something to you. So I don't think that's safe to say that they're blameless, but I'd have to say it's similar to the way comic books, when they came out, everyone blamed them for the rise in crime, but we don't really think that is an issue today. So I think it's a newer medium, and that's kind of why television and video games often get singled out in these circumstances.
I really agree with you. I think historically, almost every sort of new media or technology has been blamed for violence. Rock and roll, of course, was blamed for a spate of shootings, and then it advanced to television and video games. But on your point, I really agree that there are other countries that play far more video games with young adolescent boys than American boys do. For example, Japan spends a far larger amount on video games and generally plays more hours of video games, yet they have seen far less of these shooting deaths than in the United States. And I also know that there is a study done by the FBI or the U.S. Secret Service in 2004 that showed that less than 1/8 of these shooters played violent video games. So I don't think that that really can be a causation that can be made. Maybe there's some correlation in some instances, but I don't think there's this definite link of, oh, you played violent video games, you have a tendency to be more violent.
And I also saw that same report, and I think the thing with video games was that became a really popular scapegoat, especially in the media and conversation about gun violence in America after the Columbine shootings, because video games, Doom had just come out at the time, and that was really the scapegoat back then. Both the shooters had played Doom before, so it was just something to blame at that point. But I think there is something to be said about media consumption and the predisposition, so to speak. If someone has some kind of psychological illness and they have that media there, is that going to instigate, violent action? I think that's something to consider.
In addition to, you bring up, traditional media, a lot of the people our age and a lot of the persons of the age of, the shooters you see in high school and college shootings, they do spend a significant amount of time on social media just like we all do. Do you think, the more time people are spending online reduces their, I guess, in the cases of these shooters, their ability to, express their emotions, communicate with people, and maybe it's distorting their perception of, what they should be doing and maybe affecting the way they think, and as a result, turning to these, I guess, extreme ways of trying to solve their problem?
I think in video games we can examine the different means and modes in which they express themselves. In other words, maybe they're missing certain sides of their lives when they are delving into the video games and not spending more time around other people. Having a conversation upon different means and modes of communication and relation to other people. Yes?
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I think that playing video games and also a lot of social media and online time is spent because these young men already feel isolated. So it's not that they're isolating themselves, it's just that they feel like they don't have a good social group, and so that's why they're spending time online. But it's not spending time online that makes them isolated, it's the reverse. I do think though that online interactions can actually be really healthy for a lot of people. I mean, if you look at people with severe autism, being able to interact with other people online has actually been a really healthy outlet for them to communicate and express emotions that they otherwise couldn't. And so some of these, especially autistic teenagers, would used to get really frustrated because they couldn't communicate, but being online and interacting that way has given them a better outlet and way of communicating that actually decreases that frustration.
Social media might actually be helping these people find an outlet to express their feelings.
If you're really shy or introverted, you may not feel like you have friends, but maybe you find an online social community that can really help support you.
And along those lines, I know that I read a study recently that says that the more shy and introverted people, they make friends easier online than those extroverted people. You'd think that if you're extroverted, you could go online and make tons of friends anyways, but it seems that personality type likes to gather to an online community. So I think there's a lot to be said for that.
And so if you have these people communicating online, they're reaching out to people, I guess how do we make sure students students in some cases are communicating appropriately and that are looking out for warning signs? Because in the case of Jalen Freiberg, who was the shooter in the Marysville shooting, he was posting statuses online that clearly weren't, someone you would come from someone of a sane mind. And so are there ways people can look out for maybe, those dangerous communications online?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think, not only do we need to be more aware of that, but I think we need to be more proactive as just a society. We need to be aware. It'd be like being aware of signs of suicide in, young people our age. I think it's just a very good thing to educate the public on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the bystander intervention phenomenon that happens online as well, where you think if someone posts a status, their other friends are going to see it, maybe closer friends, and that they're going to report it so you don't have to. And so I think we need to get rid of that notion and think, all right, even if I don't know this person that well, if I see a status that indicates something wrong, it is an obligation that I have socially to check on this person and make sure they're okay and aren't going to harm themselves or others. So we can't just think other people will do it. We have to be proactive, like you said.
So there's a degree of personal responsibility when you're interacting with people.
Plus, I think that you should, educate parents. I mean, parents should be aware of the social media, the children on what they're posting. I mean, if you can see it, possibly, you're the one that knows your child the best. I mean, you're obviously more equipped to know how they speak and if this is abnormal in any way. And I mean, it's kind of your responsibility as a parent anyways to make sure your child's safe.
All right. With that note, we're going to wrap up the discussion on what factors might influence these shooters. We're now going to turn to the discussion about whether or not, allowing students and faculty to carry weapons on campus might deter future shooters from carrying out their crimes. Now, some people who are in favor of allowing students and faculty to carry weapons on campus feel that if multiple people are armed on campus, not only will that, scare a potential shooter into not, walking into a room when everyone else is armed, but it will also make sure that in the event that someone does decide to carry out one of these shootings, there's a potential for someone is better prepared, more likely to react and potentially strike the shooter down. Now, the argument against that right now is that this is only going to lead to more accidents. People are going to get shot on accident, and that more people overall are just going to be less safe. So what do you guys think? Do you think allowing students and faculty to carry, handguns and weapons onto campus would be a good idea to help deter future shootings?
In the specific example that a school shooting does happen, if there are more guns and more people drawing, it leads to more circumstances of friendly fire. So whether or not there be accidents on campus, I don't think that there would be, but that an occurrence of friendly fire, many more people may go down just because of other people with weapons.
I agree that students or faculty with conceal and carry permits, just because they may be able to shoot at a shooting range or hunt, doesn't necessarily mean that they're trained in the best way to react in a school shooting type of situation. I've gone hunting, I've been at a shooting range, but I feel like in that sort of situation, friendly fire might occur, I might miss the shooter, I might enrage them. So I'm personally not for it. I also do think it definitely needs to be a campus by campus choice. So I know that right now we have a very conservative legislators, and so I'm really hoping that they at least make campuses, give them the ability to make their own choice rather than making a broad blanket conceal and carry allowance.
Yeah, I'm a strong supporter of concealed carry, especially on a college campus, and I definitely think what you think. It should definitely be a school-by-school basis, student input. I mean, students should students should absolutely feel safe in their classroom. Is the first thing, And so if they are totally uncomfortable with someone concealed carrying in their classroom, I think they have a right to express that. And I think if the majority of students feel that way, then it shouldn't have to be controlled by a state legislator.
All right. Do you guys feel that UT Dallas would not benefit from allowing concealed carry handguns in the classroom?
I don't think we would. I think that it would take away from the learning environment. Obviously, it's a concealed handgun, but if you somehow knew the person next to you had a handgun, I think it'd be very distracting. I also know that two things I think are important. The first is that college campuses tend to be way safer than outside environments. They have a far, far lower percentage of shooting deaths besides these occasional mass shootings. So that's one thing. But I think the second thing is you have to realize with college students, you have higher rates of depression and suicide attempts, and you also have more alcohol. And guns don't mix well with alcohol, and they don't mix well with the kids that are depressed and considering suicide. So I think those are factors that have to be considered.
Adding fuel to the fire?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you brought up an interesting point about whether or not you know someone has a gun next to you. How would you know?
So, I think it's possible, for the gun to be, you could see it,
That is possible,
right.
Yes. And that actually, until recently, there was actually a misdemeanor to have partially your gun displayed.
Right.
And now there's new law that says if it's an accidental, if I lift my shirt up,
right.
and it's displaying for a little bit and goes back down, it's no longer. So you're saying, you could be, if I'm sitting next to you in a classroom, I'm concealed carrying, and I bend over to pick something up off the ground, and you see that, you could potentially be uncomfortable with that. And I think that's a valid thing. But I think you could also see that in an environment outside the classroom, you know?
Right. It's just, I think it would be more distracting for me in a classroom setting. Generally, if I'm in an environment outside the classroom, I can move, go away. But if I'm
Right.
sitting directly next to someone, I'm sort of stuck there. And mishaps do happen. I do think they're very rare, but I know there was a professor recently somewhere in the Midwest that had conceal and carry, and halfway through class, the handgun discharged. She didn't have it holstered, and it shot into his foot. So,
Yeah.
things happen. And so I do think it could be distracting, but it definitely should be a campus-by-campus decision.
Definitely, yeah. And I think, you kind of brought up a lot of people might be concerned about like the safety. And I think, just increasing safety and making people more aware, especially concealed handgun, carriers themselves, they do one class and that's how you get the license, I think it should be a lot more reoccurring safety. And definitely people who have it should practice more often. I think I think a lot of times what happens is people get very familiar with guns. They demystify the whole, violence between it, and they see it just as a tool, and they get reckless with the tool. And it's not, because they want to be reckless with it. It happens in law enforcement all the time. Mishappens all the time because they're just so used to it. They carry a gun every single day. And so I think one way, just preventing that would just be to increase the safety when getting such a license.
Do you think there could be a compromise that students might be more comfortable knowing only faculty carried concealed handguns? I mean, that's somewhat of a compromise. Your neighbor's not carrying one, but I mean, you're already going to the class. You hopefully look up in respect to the teachers or the instructors. So would people, do you think, feel safer with something like that?
I think we're like all adults here, though.
That's true.
So I think it's just like, why have that discrepancy?
I think the discrepancy should be maintained because when Nancy brought up the idea that a shooter may become enraged or more ballsy, if you will, if more guns are on campus, is there a high associated with these individuals seeking out this dangerous behavior? Students would have to respect this discrepancy, though. With it in place, the students may not know who has guns, whether or not they be faculty or not, just that there has been an announcement that there are higher concentrations of lethally armed individuals on campus. May be enough to deter the individuals who are seeking out this dangerous behavior, but not enough to raise many more questions about safety within the student body itself. What do you guys think?
I'm not so sure it's much of a deterrence to have more people with guns on campus. I think most of these individuals go in knowing they're going to harm people and possibly shot down or commit suicide themselves at the end of their actions. That's pretty common in these school-type shootings. So I don't think that knowing that someone could shoot them is going to be a deterrent. To me, I see it more as you stop them from shooting additional people, and I think that's the value.
Absolutely. I don't see it as a deterrent. I see it as someone just exercising a civil liberty. They feel personally like they need that defense, and I think if that makes them more comfortable and they're allowed to exercise that civil liberty, then they can.
All right, panelists. There are a lot of differing opinions about this issue, but I think we can all agree that we're all very thankful that UT Dallas has been a safe campus thus far, and that we all can learn and study in a place where we don't have to worry about issues like that. As far as this issue goes, this wraps up this episode of Line of Fire. If you would like to learn more about the issues we discussed here today, you can always check out utdtv.com or the UTD Mercury. I'm Stanley Joseph, and thank you for joining us today on Line of Fire.